Welcome to the Inland Valley Storytellers monthly story swap. My name is John St. Clair, and I am your Zoom host. And tonight we're starting out with a small group, but hopefully some people will be joining a little later on. And we don't need to introduce each other because everybody that's here knows each other already. So I think, well, is there anybody who has a story and would like to go first?
Well, I have a story, but Elizabeth can go first if she wants.
No, not really. I'd love to listen to you, Nick. I am surprised that there are so few of us, and I didn't prepare anything.
Oh, okay.
But you know, worst to worst come, I can still say something. But yeah, for now, let's listen to Nick. Nick, come up with one of those long stories.
Well, I actually have a story that has to do with today because today is election day.
Yeah.
And I have a reason why I always try to get to the general election in November, no matter what. It was raining, but it stopped raining for just long enough for me to get to the polling place and back. I had my umbrella and raincoat with me though, because I was going to go to the polling place. Yeah, I know you can do things by mail or in the drop boxes that are in the parks and places like that. But I've been in the habit of going to the polling place if it's at all possible, unless I'm deathly ill or something. And it's been that way for 39 years. And that's because, well, I guess I have to explain to you why, for me, elections remind me of the Nobel Prize, a topless bar, and a case of arson. Because you see, I lived for many years in Pasadena, as you may know, and I attended Caltech until they and I got tired of each other. But I was still around the campus and living very close to it and doing work for the newspaper at Caltech after I was no longer a student. And there was a funny thing about the newspaper. The newspaper at Caltech was actually heavily subsidized by ads from local businesses. And most of those local businesses were, you know, movie theaters and the printing company that did the bulk of our printing, at least the first year that I was involved with the newspaper. But there was also a regular weekly ad from a topless bar that was a few blocks from campus, one where most of the students weren't even old enough to go in. And it seemed like an odd thing for the student newspaper to carry ads for a 21-year and over establishment, but eventually I found out that there was a reason. One of the regular customers at the topless bar was Nobel laureate in physics, Richard Feynman. Now, okay, you could see how somebody might want to go there after work, have a couple of drinks, relax, but no, he would go there a couple of times a week for lunch. And the odd thing about that was that nobody objected. He was on days when he wasn't teaching that afternoon. When you're a Nobel laureate, you can kind of set your own teaching schedule. But the thing was that he would go there and, much to everyone's amazement, work on the physics that explained the universe at large. Now, you'd think somebody was making up a story like that if you heard that they were going to a topless bar to work on physics. But the fact was that the local business community, that was basically the annoying people within a couple of blocks of that topless bar, had filed complaints that this place was in fact obscene under the law and should be shut down. It had already been established what the limits were and what the rules were, and the bar was apparently following all of them very carefully and obeying all of the laws having to do with having topless waitresses and dancers in a bar. Well, when it came time for the actual trial, though, everyone was surprised to see Dr. Richard Feynman listed as one of the defense witnesses speaking in favor of the bar. Now, you would think that having a professor on your side, you would bring in a professor of law, a professor of ethics, but no, this was a Nobel laureate in physics. And when it came time for him to be sworn in, he was sworn in, went up on the witness stand, and he had given the defense attorneys napkins to enter into evidence. And these were not ordinary napkins. These were napkins from the High Life Tavern, and on them were, in his own handwriting, equations being used to calculate things having to do with quantum mechanics and the workings of the universe. It seems that he would go there, have lunch, and maybe a mild beverage, and sit there in that atmosphere, writing out equations and thinking about them and working on them, where nothing academic was going to interfere with what he was doing. And he was actually doing serious work on physics while sitting in a topless bar. The prosecutors were stunned. The verdict, of course, came in favor of the High Life, and everyone thanked Professor Feynman, and he left. And, well, suspiciously, soon after, there was a fire that did not start in a normal way that burned down the High Life. Now, everyone in the community knew pretty much who was behind the fire. It's just that it was never proven. But the local grocer who was down at the other end of that block was among the most vociferous opponents to the High Life's continued existence. And so it's very likely that he or his friend had something to do with the fire. Sadly, the insurance payments were not enough to rebuild up to code, and they moved somewhere else where the building was already in existence and changed the name, and it was no longer the same place. So Dr. Feynman lost the place where he had done much of his daily work. Well, that's not entirely the story of the elections, but that's part of the reason why elections were important. You see, in 1983, I was working down the street from that grocery store and a couple of blocks from where the site of that old place had been, the old High Life. It was now the site of something else, but there was an election coming up. And the owner of that grocery store was running for a position in the organization that runs the community college that's in Pasadena. I really didn't like him because of what he had done and because he was kind of a jerk. But I wanted to vote against him in that election. The problem was I had applied for a new job that would be a part-time job at the Pasadena Public Library. And this was my doorway into getting into the library world from what I'd done immediately before, which was the bookstore field. I was still also working part-time for the Caltech newspaper because I had become their typesetter. Oddly enough, because I learned how to type when I was about 10 years old, I was pretty good at it. And I'd learned on the various digital typesetting machines that came along. And so I did a lot of work on a weekly basis for the student newspaper there, because back then you still needed somebody to typeset stuff. It wasn't just a matter of sending files over the internet. They had to be properly formatted and printed out and pasted up and printed. So there was one catch. Since I still had my old job, which was typically from noon until 9, I had to go take a medical exam and pass that in order to be employed by the city of Pasadena. And the only openings they had for me to take the medical exam were the morning of that election day. So I went over to Huntington Hospital where they were doing the tests, and things dragged on and on and on. By the time we'd finished the medical tests, which were actually fairly trivial, it just took forever for them to start, I had to rush off and get to my bookstore job. That left me no time before the polls closed to go to the polls and vote in the election for the community college board. Now, that wouldn't have been so bad. I would have been greatly disappointed if the guy I didn't like had won, but instead the results were far stranger than that. They counted the ballots. Everyone was stunned. They counted them again. The election was an exact tie.
Oh no.
They had to run an entire other election for one office where my vote would have decided it had I been able to get to the election and vote. So it is that every election since then, every November election since then, because I will admit that once in a while I've missed a primary election or sent in a ballot by absentee ballot for one of those. But every November election, I've made sure that my vote gets counted, because if that ever happens again, well, it could still be my fault if my vote is what causes the tie. So maybe there is no solution, but I'll still feel more comfortable if I've dropped off my ballot myself and voted myself. And that's why I just got home a little while ago from the polling place. I didn't get rained on though. I managed to avoid that.
All right.
Wow, you know, this story is very similar with what, you know, when you apply for citizenship, like in my case, they give you a little booklet and it tells you how important it is to vote and this and that. And then the example there is that United States is an English-speaking country because one vote made the difference between English and German way back
Wow.
200 years ago. So this is the example to tell us how important it is to go and vote. So yeah, that's really interesting story. Thank you.
Yeah, great story, Nick. All right, so Ron Chick has joined us, and so has Angela Lloyd. Great. So Nick just finished the first story. Who would like to be next? Do you have one, Ron? Or oh, you're muted. I can't hear you.
Good evening, everybody. How are you tonight?
I can hear you now.
Can y'all hear me?
Yep.
Probably gonna switch me to center screen here.
Yeah, so do you have a story?
I have been debating with myself. I'm going to be involved in several celebrations, and I've been trying to decide what story to tell where. So I think tonight, with you guys who have heard most of my tales at one time or another, I'm going to go with Wali Dad Gunjay, Wali Dad the Generals, which goes with the Thanksgiving theme. And I haven't told it in a couple of years, so I'm hoping to get it all together. Wali Dad Gunjay, or Wali Dad the Bald, made his living cutting grass in the wadi. He had a small cabin that he lived in that had been made by one of his ancestors. His grandfather had lived there in his lifetime, as had his father, and now he lived there. And he knew every single stone down in the great swampy wadi, and could always get tender grass to cut and bring up, bundle up, and sell in the village. And for his bundles of grass, some days He got 3 copper coins, some days 4 or 5, but never very much at a time. And with that, he bought his bread and his onions. And if he had a coin left over, underneath his pillow was the top of a jar that his father had dug there, planted beneath it, and he would drop extra coins in there. And in this humble way, he made his living. He began to notice, though, as coins dropped in, that this sounded a little different. And one night, he looked down and he could see copper coins just a little ways down the stem. The open bottle below it had been filled completely. So a couple of days later, when he had filled it up to the very top, he thought, I must dig up this jar and see what I can do with the coins. I need nothing besides what I have now. I mean, well, maybe I could use a new blanket. Surely there'd be enough money here for a new blanket. This one's grown kind of thin. And so instead of going into the wadi to cut grass and get more coins the next day, he began to dig up his floor. But it wasn't a small jar. It was a great vessel. It must have been placed there by his great-great-great-grandfather, for all he knew. And his family had been saving coins for all these many years. When he pulled out all the coins, he thought, if I let it be known that I had this many coins, I would be in great danger. There is not much that I need, but surely I can do some things, and I can trade these coins for things of greater value that will be easier to protect. And so he went in, and he asked the merchant where he usually bought his bread, how much he could buy there. And he bought a new blanket and a new jacket and some new pants and some new shoes, and had only used a tiny portion of the enormous number of coins he had with him. So he went to his friend, the jeweler, and he said, I need to get something that will be very special, that will be expensive enough that it will be worth the value of my coin. The merchant counted it up and said, this would buy everything I own except one item. Many years ago, on a journey, my father brought this beautiful bracelet. It has so many jewels and diamonds in it that no one in our village has ever been able to even approach buying it. I will trade it for your coins. Wally looked at it and thought it was a thing of great beauty and agreed. And then he went home with the bracelet on his arm. And he filled in the hole and put a smaller jar there, and then lay down to sleep and thought, you know, I really do not need this wealth. And if word gets out that I have this here, someone will come looking for it when I'm out cutting grass, and I don't know quite what to do. Now, there was a great merchant, traveling caravan fellow, who had bought grass from him for years. And it just so happened that this fine gentleman, who knew Wally well, came by with a caravan heading into the village for one of his infrequent stops. So Wally went to him and said, my friend, I have known you for many years, and you have traveled throughout the world. I have this thing of great beauty, but it is too much for a humble man like me. Is there in the world a princess for whose beauty and grace and kindness would be worthy of this as a gift? The merchant thought this was a strange request, but he said, I have traveled throughout the nations of the earth, and there is one princess who is so friendly, helpful, and kind that I'm sure this would be the perfect gift for her. Then take this with you on your journey. Okay? And if she asks who it was, just say, an admirer from afar has sent it to you. So the man traveled on, and after a few months, he came to this town where the princess lived. And he asked permission to see her, and of course it was granted, for she opened her palace and places often to people as came by, and knew this to be an honest merchant anyway. And he said, we have some things that we may trade with each other, but first to have a gift. And he handed her the package. Okay? And when she put on the bracelet, she looked at it and said, this is magnificent. this is as pretty as anything I have ever owned. Who sent it to me? An admirer from afar. She said, well, I don't know how to respond to this. Come back tomorrow morning. She went immediately to her father and said, Your Majesty, this gift has been sent to me by a stranger saying he admires me from afar. Hey, what do you think it means? I do not know, but such a magnificent gift cannot be unanswered. Let us see what we can put together to send back to your admirer. And when the merchant came back the next day, there, lining up outside, were horses laden with precious silks, and some jewelry, 20 of them. The merchant said, this is way too much. Send it to him with our compliments and thank him for the gift. And so the merchant took along the goods that had been given as a gift and the extra horses and added them to his caravan. And after a goodly while, they came back around toward Wally Dodd's house. He had, of course, been making his living the way he always had. He was out in the water and he looked out and he saw in the distance, oh, a caravan is coming. How wonderful. I will not have to go into the village to sell my grass today, but I better get some more. And so he cut very quickly and rushed back and was making bundles when he realized this was the caravan of his friend. His friend rode up and said, Wally, I don't know what to tell you. Okay. The princess has given these horses and these fine silks and these jewels to you in exchange for your kind gift. Wally looked at the beasts and thought, I would have to work so very hard to keep them fed. There is not much grass here. It would be hard to do. And what use have I for silks? I'll tell you what, my merchant friend. In your travels, there must be someone, some prince, who can make use of these beautiful horses, and might have use for the silks as well. I know many kings and princes, but one stands out in my mind. He is bold and strong and often gets involved in things, but he is kind and generous when he can be. I think these horses will do well for him. Well, merchant, take a couple for yourself in your trouble. I'd keep one here in the village in case I ever have need of a horse. And take the rest of this prince friend of yours. And what shall I say when I present them? That someone who's heard of his strength and power has given him a gift. So the merchant went straightway to that prince's kingdom and presented the animals and the silks. And Wally Dodd thought, and the prince thought, what is this about? Just someone who has heard of your wealth and power and wanted to give you a gift, he said. Let me talk to my father. Come back tomorrow. When he came back the next morning, there were elephants, 20 elephants, each one stacked with precious goods of one kind or another. Each one of them worth many people's entire lifetimes working and many kingdoms' yearly income, massive amount of wealth. And this, he said, take these back to my benefactor and say, this gift is matched. But by now, the merchant was very worried. He had no idea where all of this was going to go and what could be done about it. But he had no choice. He turned around and went back to the home of Wally Dodd and said, these elephants and all of this wealth is for you. Wally said, oh no, I could not manage to feed one elephant, much less 20 of them, and all this wealth is too much for me. What am I to do? I don't know. But you have to, you can't keep it here. We will have to hire a great many guards and soldiers just to get it to the princess's castle. I don't know what to tell you to do. I'm sure her father will be furious when he finds out that you are a simple grass cutter from a jungle. Hey, but what else can we do? Very reluctantly, they took the elephants and some horses and some men and some guards on the long road to the princess's kingdom. As they went along, Wally thought, what's going to happen to me? Surely they will kill me. What else can I do if my friend gets killed for it too? That would be a terrible tragedy. I know the only thing I can possibly do to prevent this great tragedy is I will have to kill myself. And so he went away from the camp late at night. He went out to a place where there was a great cliff above the crashing sea below. And he looked at it and thought, forgive me, Lord. But I cannot face this terror. I cannot go where my life will be for. He looked at the cliff one more time. He tried to jump, but he just couldn't do it. And he sat on the ground and began to cry. This was midnight, and yet suddenly behind him, there was light. And he turned around, and there were two beings made of beautiful moonlight, standing in front of him. Surely these were angels of Allah. And they looked at him and said, Wali Dad, come away from the cliff. What am I to do? I cannot. We know your problem. Come with us. And they went back to where his house had been. Only instead of a house, there was a great manor house there. And he could see servants and people all about. And they said, your kindness and generosity has been noticed, Wali Dad. Tomorrow will be just fine. The next morning, when he woke up in a strange place with beautiful, magnificent clothing, he could see in the distance a great column of people coming toward his home. And there indeed was the emperor and his daughter come to see him. When they approached the castle, he said, come inside, there is food for you. Let me tell you how this has all come about. Her father said, are you the secret admirer? Well, yes, sir, your majesty. Well, I suppose you've wanted to do this, to win her hand in marriage. This is such magnificent wealth that I give my consent. And Wali Dad looked at the beautiful princess and looked at his old and wrinkled head and said, Princess, do not take this amiss, but I am old and tired and not long for this world, and someone as beautiful and kind and smart as you should have a husband as matches your skills and beauty. And I know just the man. And so the merchant, with several others, rushed off to the far kingdom where the young prince had been. And he was happy to come back with gifts and things. And the two of them were married, and they took a piece of their father's kingdoms and made a kingdom for themselves. Wali Dad lived in his humble shack for the rest of his life, but never again did he have to cut grass in the wadi, for there were angels to see to his every human need. The tale of Wali Dad the Bald.
Right. Great story. I think I've heard that before, and it's a wonderful, wonderful story. Thank you for
It's a Karen Chase tale if you wanted to know its origin.
Yeah, great story. By the way, in the chat section, I put the link to the Telebration webpage for the live Telebration at the Folk Music Center.
Okay.
And we've pretty much made the arrangements. I need to make a flyer and take it, make copies and take it to Ellen at the Folk Music Center. And then I still need to hear from people about the individual web page. So Ron, if you could take a look at that link and see if I need to update things about yourself.
Read it this afternoon. I think it's just fine.
It's okay.
It matches pretty much what's going on with me in storytelling.
Okay, good. And I have not heard anything from Stephanie. Angela, maybe you could contact her and tell her to take a look and see if there's anything I need to do to update hers.
Yeah, I can send that link that you put in the chat to her.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you, I'll send her, I'll call her.
Okay.
So she doesn't, yeah, I'll reach out to her.
Okay. Does she not use email very much, or?
I'm not really sure. I haven't been in touch with her much, so I'm thrilled to know she's going to be there.
Yeah, me too. And
Oh.
and the thing is, I have discovered with some people, their spam filter
Yeah.
makes my email, puts it in the spam folder or the junk folder or whatever it is, and she may not even have seen my emails. So
Yeah.
if you could contact her, I'd appreciate that.
And you want her to just be in touch with you regarding her bio, or what's in that file? What's on that link?
Yeah. So I'd like her to look at the bio. It's last year's information, and maybe things have changed. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay.
And also have her check her spam folder and see if maybe that's what's happening to my emails. And
the email you're sending it from, is it John St. Clair from Inland Valley Tellers, or
yeah,
is it that email?
Yeah, it's the john.stclair@inlandstorytellers.org.
Because if she added that to her address book, then it wouldn't go to spam, I think.
Yeah, that might be the solution. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Angela, do you have a story tonight?
Well, I forgot about the meeting. I remembered, so thanks for the link. And I think I forwarded the link to Jennifer Jaffe, which is, for some reason, I couldn't find it. So thanks for sending it again. I'm trying to remember if I was here in October. The story I was thinking I would tell is about going to Jonesboro the first time, but I can't remember if I did that with you all before.
I haven't heard it.
Yeah, I don't think so. Or if I have heard it, I don't remember it.
That's the good news. Diane Ferlat would say mind over 60.
Yeah.
So yeah, I could tell that story. What I want to do though is just take a minute and find my holder for my phone, because I came downstairs. So give me a minute.
Okay.
And let me get my iPhone holder.
Okay, that's fine. So, last year, the live celebration at the Folk Music Center, we required proof of vaccination and wearing of masks. This year, we're not going to mess with having people show proof of vaccination, but we will require people to wear masks indoors. And I will bring a box of masks in case anybody forgets. So that shouldn't be a problem. And the only person not wearing a mask will be whoever is telling the story at the time. I managed to escape my 55th reunion and a number of indoor events without getting COVID. So I'm hoping that luck continues, but I am fully vaccinated, which I think does help. So Angela's doing Zoom on her phone. That seems like it would be a very small screen. Do any of the rest of you do Zoom on your phone?
I have every month for the Doc Moore storytelling thing, which happens at 5:30, on the third Thursday our time. I have used my phone to zoom in on my way down to Inland Valley Storytell, not to South Coast Storytelling Guild. So I have done this with a holder in my cup holder in my car or truck while driving along. It is jiggly, but they can at least see and hear me.
Yeah.
But so yeah, it can be done. I prefer using my iPad for the obvious reason that I can see who you are. If this was on my phone, you would be so small, I wouldn't have any idea who was speaking.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. And as I get older, my eyesight gets worse. And if anything, I want a bigger screen, not a smaller screen.
Yeah.
While I set this up, I found the holder, which is very great. This is really good. I wanted to just share a little update about NSN, if I could.
Yes, go right ahead.
So there's a board meeting this Saturday, and members of NSN can attend the board meeting. You're not allowed to speak unless you get on their agenda, but you can listen in. And so the NSN is in quite a large transition right now. And so I just, if you're interested in hearing what's going on, it's going to be 10 o'clock Pacific time. It's noon Central. So let's see, I'm going to turn around here.
I just renewed both my personal NSN membership and the group, the affiliate membership with Storytellers today.
Yeah. Great. Well, I was there. I'm now the chair of the YES group. The YES Youth Educator Storytelling Group. So I went to a SIG leadership meeting last night, yesterday afternoon. And so the SIG leaders are going to go to the board meeting this Saturday. There's been a suggestion that they might reorient rather than having regions of stories or regional areas around the country, of having the SIGs, the special interest groups, be the various regions in a sense, or the collecting piece, because the special interest groups are really doing most of the programming that's happening now. So anyway, I'm going to do one more change here. Flip this around. Let's see what happens here. Yeah. Okay. So you can register for the board meeting on the NSN website.
Okay.
So if you have some interest, and Danny is no longer, Danny is now will be hired for particular contractual jobs. The woman who has been the sort of point person, but she is not going to the office anymore unless it's for a very particular task. And there's volunteers handling the other stuff. So so I loved seeing Ron's grandson sitting in front of him when you shared your story, Ron. And it reminded me of when we would be at in-person events and we could see another audience member listening. And it reminded me of being at Sierra Storytelling Festival, where Larry Littlebird, who was from, I believe he's from Acoma, Pueblo in New Mexico. And he told a story about being raised his grandmother was very much in his life when he was being raised. And he told us stories about anytime he did something that might need a little encouragement in an opposite direction, his grandmother would pull him onto her lap. And as he described it, his heart would be next to her heart. And she would tell a story to him. So he described her voice being right by his ear. And she would tell a traditional story that would address in a really gentle, open way whatever it was, that direction that she wanted him to think, or something she wanted him to think about. And I've never forgotten that image of him, of a child being on someone's lap and their voice going right inside their ear and their heart beating like right next to the heart of the person who was speaking to them. And it's very loving, kind, soft, gentle, nurturing image. So it was really sweet to see. What's your grandson's name?
That's Grayson.
Grayson.
And
I
Grayson
loved it
loves
when
listening to my stories. He loves to sit on my lap while I tell stories.
Mhm.
Okay, so he sometimes listens in if I'm home for Doc Moore, and he's listened to him when I've told here before. But no one ever zooms into South Coast who isn't telling for South Coast. So he's never gone with me down there for any of those events. There is a actual physical presence requested concert, a storytelling event at the Muckenthaler on the 18th of December, where the South Coast Storytelling Guild will be telling stories, trading off with a musician in 30-minute blocks for the whole time from 1 o'clock to 5 o'clock on the 18th of December. And all of you are please make your plans now, put it on your calendars, plan it carefully, invited to my home for the Feast of Stories on January 6th. Some of you have been to this event. The format is simple. Hey, lots of food. Hey, and we tell stories to each other, Season of Joy stories. Not all of them are Christian, but they're all joyful. And so I'm always looking for storytellers to tell. I'd love for any of you to tell. John's come many years. And hopefully some of you can join us. End of commercial.
Okay, thanks for the announcement. Okay, Angela, you ready to,
Okay.
Let's see.
Okay.
Get rid of the spotlight there and put it on Angela. There we go.
So with the National Storytelling Festival in play in October, I got to thinking about how I made my way there the very first time. And it was a bit of a circuitous route. So my father's sister lived in Santa Maria. And in the early 70s, she began to engage with Warner Earhart's EST training. And some of you may be familiar with that, but it was a series of seminars where people would, for 3 to 4 days, sort of take a look at their lives. And the seminar program really had to do with people looking at where their responsibility was for their lives and the choices they had made. And this often involved some kind of redirection, like rethinking or seeing in a fresh way whatever you were up to. So my aunt engaged in the 70s with them. And then EST went through some changes and they became known as Landmark. So in the 1980s, when I started to live in California and I would go and see her, she was taking different seminars, different weekends and things. And so in 1986, she reached out to me to see if I'd like to come up to Santa Barbara and be there as a guest when she would complete a seminar. And this was a seminar that had happened over a number of weeks. It wasn't a weekend thing. It was something that happened over a longer period of time. So I went. And to my surprise, when I got there, they separated the guests from the people who had taken the seminar, and they took all of us, the guests, up into another room in the hotel and proceeded to do a marketing to sell the seminars to us while our relatives were completing the program downstairs. And then we were going to go down and watch something. I don't even remember that part of the evening. But what I remember was being in the hotel and the marketing job that was proceeded to happen with very well dressed, well suited gentlemen in suits, very shiny shoes, very well coiffed, lots of jewelry, good cologne, fresh cologne. And they were doing their selling. So one of the parts of it was you could make a deposit that night of $150. And then you would pay the balance of $600 for a 4-day thing later when you came to do the seminar. This was in September. The seminar would be in November. And I said to the fellow, I'm interested in doing it, but I don't understand what we're going to be doing for 4 days. And so then he would talk, and I really just couldn't understand. I really couldn't. He never was specific. And I'd been around 12-step programs, and in 12-step programs, they're very clear about what you're going to do with those because you have 12 steps. So I was comparing his non-description with what was happening in the 12-step programs. So finally, when it came time, what do you want to do it? I said, well, I only have like $156 in my bank account. And he said, well, you can give me a check for $150 and then you can go back home and you can manifest the rest of the money for the seminar. And that's actually part of the work. If you really want to do the work, then you can manifest the balance and then come and do the work in September. So I wrote him a check for $150 and I gave it to him.
Wow.
And then we went downstairs and as I said before, I don't remember anything about my aunt's graduation or that culmination. And then I came home. And so this was in September. And a week later, I received in the mail a letter from the United States Post Office with my check in it. And it had gotten lost. So maybe the envelope the fellow put it in to mail it to Landmark opened. My check was floating around in a mailbox. They put it in an envelope and they mailed it back to me. And when I got it in the mail, I was thrilled because I thought, oh, now I can make the decision by myself without a fellow in a suit leaning over my table. And so I was thinking about doing it. And I had come back from Santa Maria. I had reached out to a local school and I had booked a residency in October that was going to pay me $600. So I did the thing he told me to do. So that worked. So that's what I was thinking over the weekend. And on the Monday, I got in the mail a brochure for the National Storytelling Festival. And I'd been getting the magazine for 2 years. And I never thought I'd ever go to the festival. It was in Tennessee. That's like really far away. That's an airplane flight. That's a lot of money. But now, like the door had been opened. And I thought, I could use this $150. I want to go to Jonesboro. So I called my brother, the anesthesiologist, and I called my brother, the merchant marine. They had regular jobs. And I said, I've booked a residency at a school. I can pay you back the money in a month. Can you each send me $300 so I can buy a plane ticket and go to Jonesboro? And they did. So this is Monday. Thursday night, I flew on a red-eye flight to Jonesboro, and I had arranged to stay with a woman I had met very briefly several years before. And she picked me up at the airport, took me to her house. I left my suitcase and she drove me into Jonesboro. She lived in Johnson City. And then I was in Jonesboro. And I remember walking around after hearing the first concert. My first concert, it wasn't the opening concert, it was around 1:00 on Friday. And then I remember walking on Main Street and over by Mill Spring Park where they do the ghost story. So there's this open green lawn. And I just remember crying. And my mother used to always tell me, Angela, when you get overtired, you cry. So I was walking around Jonesboro, I'm crying and sort of wondering, what am I doing here? You know. Well, in the concerts of that day and the evening and the next day, I heard Connie Reagan Blake and Barbara Freeman, cousins, and they were saying from the stage, go home and tell your story. I heard Catherine Wyndham say, when you listen to a family member's story, it's a way of saying, I love you. And I noticed, being a trained theater actor, that there were times when I was outside the tent because the tents were full and I couldn't even see the storyteller, but I could hear them very clearly. And I was absolutely transported. And I noticed how simple the performance act was. One person on a stage, one voice, one mic, set of string of lights, no sets, no stage managers, no costumes, no trolleys. And just how the people who took the stage and told their stories told the audience their own name. And all that was just, it really touched me. And I had been doing children's theater solo performances for 6 years by that time. And I had a character name that I always told the audience. I had costuming. I also had been in residence with children's theater companies. So I was acting in plays, but also touring my work under the auspices of the theaters. And so I thought, they're just telling the audience their own name. Like I could do that. Instead of, I told the audience, my name is Angelina Rima or Alma Rima. I had 5 sisters that hosted 5 different shows. So it was very moving. And Saturday night, for the first time ever at the festival, they moved the storytelling concert for the ghost stories into Johnson City to a theater because the audience was too large to go into the graveyard where they'd always told the ghost stories. So a group of us went to dinner at a Chinese restaurant and we all got fortune cookies. And my fortune from the cookie that night said, if you want to go somewhere, you must let yourself go. So let's all say that sentence together. If you want to go somewhere, you must let yourself go.
Oh.
So that was dinner. And then we went to the concert, the ghost story concert, and I heard Connie Reagan Blake tell Two White Horses, which is a beautiful Appalachian story that involves the death of a mother. And the mother actually has a sleeping illness, which was not uncommon in those times. So they buried her. And two grave robbers broke into the grave, dug up the grave, broke into the coffin, and tried to take off her wedding band. And they couldn't get it off her finger, and they cut off her finger. And when they cut off her finger, she woke up. And in the story, she comes home and is then knocking on her family's door with a bloody hand. And what struck me about that story was that I remembered when my mother passed away, which 6 years earlier, I suddenly remembered that moment where I was taking my mother's wedding band off her finger before the morticians came to pick up her body. And my mother had passed away in Mallorca in Spain. And when they came to pick up her body, she had died in her sleep, which I never put that together with sleeping sickness. But when they came to pick up her body, the coffin they brought was too short for my mother. And the men were very sweet and very humble. And they said, "Oh, we're so sorry. We're going to have to go away and we'll have to come back with a longer coffin." And I loved that. It was like the most ordinary moment, like the first most ordinary moment of that day. And so they left. And did I tell you they were wearing long coats like Columbo? And they look like Columbo. And they got out of a really small car, which is common to drive in Mallorca. And they brought out this small coffin. So back it goes in the car, their coats flying, and the car leaves, and then they came back. So that I remembered that moment with my own mother in that story. And then at intermission, we were outside of this beautiful large theater, and I had been wearing a ring of my mother's, which had a red garnet stone. And I looked down and the stone was gone. This little red stone was gone. So again, this memory about my mom. So the next day was Sunday, and that's the first time I heard Ed Stivender tell. I heard Laura Sims tell. I'd met Laura before, but I'd never heard her at the Sacred Storytelling concert Sunday morning in Sisters Row tent, which is this beautiful small tent. I heard them. I heard Margie Brown, who I've followed, and eventually I studied with her. And behind Sisters Row tent, there is a private home. And there's a set of stairs that goes from outside up on the outside of the house up 2 floors. And there was a whole group of us sitting on that staircase. And there was just something really holy about that moment of hearing these just beautifully told stories in that particular concert on Sunday morning. And I don't know if you've ever, after you listen to stories for 2.5 days, there is a really big tenderness that sort of shows up. And I remember really feeling that and feeling very close to the people around me, even though I didn't know most of them. And I flew home the next morning and went to Tulsa almost immediately to do a residency. And it was there that I put together my first concert of stories that had happened to me in my life, people I had met, strangers I had met, alongside 12 songs that I had chosen. This was a script that had existed, that a writer had written the monologues, and I replaced the monologues at the suggestion of a director I had set up to work with my own stories. And so I came back from Jonesboro, and in early December, I did my first performance of these 6 stories alongside a poem from the 1800s and these 12 traditional folk songs. And everything changed from that moment. So I often come back to that fortune cookie, and I usually save my fortune cookie fortunes. I would put a piece of scotch tape on them, and I used to have them on the side of my bookcase. I don't have that one, but I've never forgotten it. If you want to go somewhere, you must let yourself go. And lastly, back to the landmark, this image of what is your dream? What do you really want to do in your life? How do you take responsibility for what you really want to do? I think that in some way that transition happened from Jonesboro. And many years later, I did do that seminar with my aunt in Santa Barbara. And that was really fun work too. But I'll always be grateful to them for saying, you know, it's okay. It's okay if you have $156 in your account. You can give us a check for 150. It's like, okay, it'll be fine. And we'll lose it and we'll send it back to you.
Wow. Thank you for sharing.
So,
That you found your profession. So
hmm?
that trip to the festival, it just opened a profession for you.
Yeah, I mean, like many storytellers, you know, there's so many that were involved in some kind of theatrical work prior to coming to storytelling and then making that transition. So,
Well,
yeah.
yeah, maybe. The way I got involved was I went to library school to get my master, and I had a terrible situation that I didn't finish a program here in California, which to this day I think I was taken advantage of. And I was already in my late 40s, and I was just really very crushed. I didn't know what to do. And I was working all the time actually. And then a few years later, more than a few, probably 5, 6, I tried again out of state. And I got into another program, which was great. Actually, was great for me going out of California. And there it was a class offered by a person called Betty Hart, which was somebody very important in the Neuberry committee of giving the awards for the children books. And she was teaching a storytelling class. It was a shock to me because storytelling, in my mind and in the way I was brought up, it was for children. You tell children stories, or more likely you read stories rather than telling stories. And I was amazed that people share all kinds of stories, and she was coaching us, and I was telling a few things I thought nothing important or interesting, but people did like them. So that I got a little courage. I wish I would be more working harder for my personal to learn more and to produce more. But it is a great experience and a great awakening to see that so many people are so enthusiastic about this type of communication. And personally, I always learn a lot of things from all of you, particular, and then I used to go to more events, but now that my grandchildren moved away in another state, I just don't have the same motivation. So, but I'm really thankful for being part of this group.
We're glad to have you.
Yeah, thank you.
I love knowing you went to library school. Did you ever work as a librarian?
Yeah. I did work 25 years in the library environment, and then 20 years as a librarian.
Wow. Where was that?
Yeah, work or school?
Both.
Both. Well, I don't want to talk ill about California school system, but I was in the San Jose State Library Science Program. And after I took all the classes and I spent $7,000 from my pocket, which was an immense amount of money for me, I didn't pass the culminating experience. Part of it was a language barrier. Another part of it was the fact that they did not have any coaching. You were left on your own to do something.
Mhm.
And then number 3 is that I chose a bad subject, a subject that was too difficult. I wasn't prepared for that. So it's a combination of my poor decisions and lack of any support or interest from the program. Then the second time I applied to University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign,
Oh.
which they actually have the best library science school in the nation.
Mhm.
And the moment I introduced myself, we had something called a boot camp. Like you go and stay 2 weeks close by, everybody in the same place. We move in the same direction. And then when I talked and I told them, you know, this is the first time ever, and I was now 50. This is the first time ever that I traveled by myself. You know, I was in my parents' house, I moved in my husband's house, and you know, that's the story of it. So it was the first time ever in my life that I traveled by myself. So that was one, and to my surprise, there were a few American girls, kind of my age, and they admitted, oh, you know what, it's the same for me. So it was a little bit encouraging. I thought I was so old-fashioned and, you know, out of this world. And then second, when I said that I'm from California, the director of the program said, oh, I love to see California coming here. So that was a beautiful program. They did not have a culminating experience. That was one of the reasons I decided to try again at that old age and everything. And was just great. Was just great. I love going to Chicago. It's my favorite place so far. So it was a great experience, and actually it did open huge opportunities for me. I was happy to have a good position and able to be a good professional in an excellent environment. I worked for a university, and then I moved to community college in San Jacinto. That is where I retired from. San Jacinto Community College. Yeah. So, and the storytelling, I was in a group in Redlands, chaired by this lady, which now I apologize, I forgot her name. And I'm sorry, who?
Is that Harleen? I'm not coming up with it either, but I think
wasn't Harleen, but she started that program. And then the lady who was at the time in charge, she was extremely active. We had special evenings for different holidays, like for Halloween, we will dress up and have stories that will, will be Halloweeny.
Was her
Um,
first name
wait.
Jody?
I'm sorry?
Was her first name Jody?
Yes, Jody. Yes. Yeah. She
Yeah.
had a daughter who was an actress in Los Angeles, and that's why she moved to Los Angeles to be with her. Yeah,
I
Jody.
think, was it Jody Noel or something like that? Or?
Jody Holly. It was
Yeah,
a funny spelling, but
yeah.
Jody Holly was how it was.
Howard, yeah. And then we were meeting at the Smiley Library in Redlands, which is such a beautiful place. And it was great. And then she moved, and I don't know how I found you. I don't remember.
Well, maybe the website.
Probably from the website. Yeah.
I think
I-
Jody Holly used to cross paths with us every now and then a long time ago.
Uh-huh.
I remember
Yeah.
seeing her in Claremont.
But when she
Yeah.
was still in Redlands, she would come to the Story Swapping Festival. But I have not seen her or heard from her in quite some time. Her daughter tried to become a drama teacher at a school run by a storyteller. And there's a
Oh,
whole story about that because it did not go well.
no.
Mhm.
Well, I know she was an actress somewhere in Los Angeles.
Mhm.
Yeah, Jody organized a storytelling festival that was hosted at San Bernardino State University. I don't know if you know of that.
Yeah.
Maybe
I-
Cal State,
yeah,
San
Cal State
Bernardino.
San Bernardino. Yeah, yeah. And it was a huge attendance. And of course, I am always, a little bit intimidated because you guys are all so professional and with experience and everything. But I still like to come.
Oh, glad you do.
Yeah, well, I should learn more. I should be a better student.
I always enjoy hearing your stories.
Yeah, thank you.
Always,
Next
yeah.
time I am going, you asked me about my mother, and I didn't come up with something flattering, but I have good stories. So next time I'm gonna have a good story about my mother, something more flattering to her person.
Are you joining in any of the celebrations?
Well, I'm gonna come for the live one,
Good.
but not
Good.
perform. I will be in attendance.
Great.
If you need help, like with something, I can help.
Oh, you know
John.
what? One thing Ellen asked, and last year we did not do refreshments. And she wanted to know if we were going to do refreshments this year like we used to. And Chris and I have been going back and forth. Chris has been the main organizer of that, and in the past. What did you guys think about?
Well, I thought last year we didn't have refreshments because of the COVID.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, COVID is not gone, although right now it's definitely much less of a problem than it used to.
Right. Yeah, things
I
go
think-
back.
I think if we could do it outdoors like we used to, that would be sufficient. And it really does add a little bit of socializing time if we can do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, outdoors is safer than indoors.
Right.
Yeah. Well, if I'm needed, I can come early and help with the tables and everything, and of course I can bring stuff
Mhm.
also.
Yeah, and it's always been a really amazing spread. You could make it less
Yeah.
advantageous. I mean, one of the issues around COVID was people like using silverware or like serving, like picking up a spoon that
Right.
someone else has picked up. That that was an issue. Like, so if that was at a limit, like if you're taking brownies and putting them on a plate, right, rather than serving something with a spoon onto a plate, that might be.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
I mean, I think you and Chris have have every right to take the temperature on that, because that's a lot of work. That's a lot of work.
Yeah.
It's a lot of prep.
Mhm.
It is. But
So-
it has been a nice ending to a great evening.
Oh yeah, I mean, it holds the space for people to talk to each other.
Right.
So,
Just realized you
I've
hadn't
had-
heard me for a few moments as I had to stop and help a grandchild for a moment. And I will be happy to commit to bringing my world famous triple chocolate cookies that I brought every time this has happened. And I
Yes.
do think that an idea that would make this easier would be to have things in paper cups, like cupcake cups, so that it's all individual servings, but we don't have to try and just pick up one and go.
Yeah, yeah. Or something that is individually packaged.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a lot of work, and then you got to unwrap them to use them. So
yeah.
Yeah, but cookies or brownies served on something that you can just pick up, that would be
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
that's why I thought of
And
cupcakes.
she could just make me a personal serving of the pimento cheese that she makes.
Yeah.
You could just bring it in a closed Tupperware container and hand it to me.
Oh,
Yeah,
by
I
the
think
way,
having some kind of snack thing would be a really good plan. So
And
would
you know,
be my
we could
recommendation.
each bring something,
Mhm.
you know.
And Ellen wanted to know if there's going to be hot chocolate. I guess she really liked the hot chocolate.
yeah, that's an important thing because we'll want like the hot chocolate and whatever like the spiced cider or something that had been there because
Yeah.
it may be cooler there in the evening.
Right. Yeah, probably will.
almost always is this late in November. Yeah.
How did you make the hot chocolate? Did you heat milk with chocolate at home?
So Paul always did the hot chocolate. Paul Lovell. And I
Mhm.
haven't, he's never participated in the Zoom meetings. I don't know. I
Yeah.
could try contacting him to see if he wants.
Well, hey, those of you who've come to my January 6th event know that I do make really good cocoa. Hey, it's a little pricey because I use real cream. I don't use, milk. I use real cream and real chocolate and real sugar and lots of vanilla and marshmallows and all that wonderful stuff. But I can come up with a big pot of it.
Okay.
You can come up with that for the celebration.
Of course I can.
Oh,
That
that
would be
would be
wonderful.
amazing.
Hey, I'm not sure I want to try and make 12 dozen cookies and that, but whatever's got to help. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, maybe the hot chocolate is kind of a specialty thing. That
Trumps
might
it. Yeah, that would trump
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
we'll make it happen.
be- Okay.
Yeah, definitely I'm gonna bring something and I can come early to help with the tables.
Sure.
Yeah,
I-
that would be.
If I bring something, it'll have to be something portable. So the hot chocolate is out.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Well,
I could hit
um,
Trader Joe's and bring something. Yeah, so should we do something like individual brown, like not a bowl of almonds? Would a bowl of almonds, they would have to be put in little
little cups.
muffin cupcake cups.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard to take individual almonds without touching others. Where a cookie is much easier, or a brownie is much easier.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I think, brownies, cookies, things of nuts, maybe some grapes. Now, just things that can be served in small quantities, paper held, easy to get rid of. And when the night is done, if there's still stuff there, you can dump it all into a bag and take it home.
Just
Right.
right, take it, give it to Angela.
Of course.
I've always loved my ride home from Celebration because I would have that pimento cheese, and I'd still have some for Larry when I got home.
So you like Chris's cheese spread, huh?
Yes,
Yeah.
Who wouldn't?
it's cottage cheese and something else. I
No,
don't.
it's cottage cheese and grated cheddar cheese and garlic.
Dang. Yeah, just
Anyway, wonderful.
And a little bit of mayonnaise to get the right consistency.
mhm.
Huh.
Sounds good. That would be really good.
I'm hungry already.
I know. I think I have to go have some cottage cheese right now.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I am going to go take care of wife and grandchildren and go on with life as I know it.
Yeah.
And hopefully I will see you. Well, I know I will see some of you at the Music Center, and I'll Zoom in with the Zoom group Zoom.
Oh,
And
Ron, before
was-
you leave, there's something you should know about.
But
yes.
The new Weird Al movie has a closet you would be jealous of. And when
Uh-oh.
you see it, you'll understand why.
Cool. We intend to go to it anyway. I'm the organizer of the movie and lunch bunch here on Meetup here in Riverside. So it's always up to me to pick a movie to watch.
Well,
So I
this-
definitely picked the Weird Al one, but we're all crazy people who like Weird Al anyway.
Yes, you watch for the closet because it's something that I thought you would especially appreciate.
Cool.
Ooh.
well, thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you next time we see you.